So McClellen, I want to talk more about your time in 96, 97.
Shoot.
This was a complex time.
Very.
Politics, for social, everything. But I'm more interested to know the first time you came. What was your idea of Kosovo, and did you think it was going to be worse, or you expected something better? What was your...
Honestly, I had no idea. I literally had no idea of anything about Kosovo. I mean, I knew from having studied Yugoslavia in the past that there were these two autonomous regions of Serbia. You know, you had Vojvodina for the Hungarians and Kosovo for the Albanians. And the argument was that neither of these groups needs a republic because they have their own countries. You know, there's Hungary, so we'll have a region for the Hungarians. There's Albania, so we'll have a region for the Albanians. But neither one needs to be a republic. They can just exist within the Republic of Serbia. And that argument kind of made sense, you know, on some level. But when Yugoslavia was united, it was obviously a very different country. And but that's really all I knew about it. And like I said, when the guy first asked me to go to Kosovo, I honestly really had not heard of it, because even my limited studies of Yugoslavia, because remember I said I was mostly studying the Soviet Union. I was mainly studying Russian and Russia and all things Russian, and you know, all the other cultures and things within the Soviet Union. I was interested in Yugoslavia, but I had not really had a chance yet to study it. So when I came down to Kosovo, one of the first books I read, and don't hit me, was Black Lamb, Gray Falcon. Okay, because that was the book that was out there about, you know, Kosovo and, you know, Serbia and all this history and everything. And I read that and I thought, okay, I can see why this is important to Serbia, but this doesn't really mesh with what I'm seeing on the ground here. You know, I get what she's saying, and I understand her arguments, but this was also written back in, the 1940s or something. And I knew it did not make sense in the current reality today. So I started reading other things, and unfortunately there wasn't much in English available from the Albanian perspective. So I was relying on conversations and interviews with people, and I started to develop this greater understanding of the history of Kosovo and how the population dynamics had shifted over the centuries, how the dominant groups, namely Serbs and Albanians, how these two dominant groups had related to each other over the centuries and how that had changed over the centuries. And also, I started learning a lot more about Albania. And there's a very good book, and I can't remember the name of it offhand, but it was written by a woman named Rose Wilder. And she was the daughter of the woman who wrote the series that's very famous in America called Little House on the Prairie. And Rose Ingalls Wilder was her name. And the book she wrote about Albania, it was a travel book where she had this old car and was driving around the Albanian mountains and everything and just talking about all of her experiences. It was an absolutely wonderful book. One of the best books I've ever read. And I really got a super positive view of Albania's traditions and culture and, you know, the village life and the mountains and, you know, vendettas. I mean, everything. It was all just fascinating. And so when I started, so I had this book learning from Black Lamb, Gray Falcon, but then I had experiential learning from being here and talking to people. And so I began to develop a greater understanding of the dynamics of the society. And so that determined what kind of programming we would be able to do. And I was determined that we were not going to just talk to one ethnic group. Okay, so it was kind of funny, actually. Because of my experience as a diplomat, I spoke Russian and Arabic to some level. I mean, I was not really fluent in either one of them, but enough. And I'm also Orthodox. And so I was able to talk to Bishop Artemia and other Orthodox clerics, usually in Russian, because they all understood Russian. So I was actually speaking to them sometimes in Russian. But when we got into heavy conversations, I'd always use an interpreter because, Russian was more like just to get acquainted and to have light conversations. And then we would switch to Serbian and my interpreter would, really get into the details. With the Islamic community, this was Dr. Recep Boya, who I was very, very fond of. I used to visit them on a fairly regular basis, and with him I would speak Arabic. He was educated in Saudi Arabia, if I'm not mistaken. His Arabic was fluent, of course, as any imam would be. And I would end up speaking Arabic, again, to some level with the Islamic clerics, because I didn't have either Albanian or Serbian. But that was enough to, start the relationship and kind of get off to a good start and to begin building a friendship. And so I had very good relations with both communities of religious leaders. And that was a critical factor in a thing we did back in I think it was actually in early 97 when we started doing this. But I made a tour of Kosovo speaking in mosques, and the Islamic community set this up for me. One of the things that I realized early on was that nobody in Kosovo, I shouldn't say nobody, but the general public did not understand our policy on Kosovo. Now, like it or not, our policy at that time was that Kosovo should stay part of Serbia, and we did not support independence. That was our policy, and I was not in a position to change it, but I had to communicate it. So whenever I was doing interviews with journalists, and I did quite a number of them, I would explain our policy, but it never made it into print. And so I just couldn't get it out there for people to understand. Now, it was important that people understand this, because if you want to turn to violence as a political tool, you need to have a clear understanding of what's at stake, and you better understand what your friends are thinking before you go into it. It's your choice. If you want to go with violence, that's your choice. If you want to stay with peaceful resistance, that's your choice. If you want to just go home and eat flea, that's your choice. Okay, but whatever you choose, you need to understand the truth about what everybody's thinking here. So I thought very early on that, if I can't tell people what our policy is, if I can't get that out through the media, then I've got to find another way. And the other way that we figured out was through the Islamic community and going to the mosque. Now, granted, we were only going to be talking to men, but at least we'd be talking to a lot of men, and then they might go and talk to their families and tell their families about it. And then we would also, at the same time, though, try to do meetings with political groups that would be integrated, in the sense that men and women would both be coming to those meetings. We were really able to speak clearly and coherently, I guess, for lack of another word, about U.S. policy. And it was not a popular thing to hear. It was not what people wanted to hear, but I had to tell them. And so it worked out very well, actually, to do this through the Islamic community, and to do it through these other political groups where we were able to meet with both men and women. And so I think a lot of that, as people became aware of what our actual policy was, I think that may have changed the thinking for a lot of people. And then, like I said, it's up to you if you want to choose resistance or choose peaceful resistance or violent resistance. That's not for us to decide. We're not going to tell you to do that. It's your choice, but here's what's at stake if you choose to do it. And then, of course, once the violence happened and once you had the ethnic cleansing, all bets were off the table and our policy changed overnight. And then we saw that independence was the only long-term solution. And so we pursued that through the UN. It took a while. It was not going to be an overnight process, but in time it happened. And I to this day feel like our contribution to making that happen came through greater awareness in the general population of what our policy was. I remember the Butucci brothers when that happened. I remember, of course, the thing with Adam Yashari at the Yashari compound, that happened, I think, right before I left. That was like, wasn't that in 97?
In March 98.
98, okay. Well, the UCHK was just starting to get active in 97.
Yes.
And, it was out in the country. It was way out in the middle of nowhere. We had to look on a map to see where it was, things like that. And it was dangerous. The embassy wouldn't let any of us go out there, because there was so much tension, between the Serbs and Albanians. And the Serb military presence was very heavy there. So that was just beginning when I left. Mm-hmm. And then from about August 97 until the NATO bombing campaign concluded, I came back about August 2000, more or less. So that was like 3 years, I guess, that I wasn't here.
Did any incident happen in 96, 97? Do you remember anything?
Well, I remember seeing police, Serbian police were not the most enlightened police in the world. They needed a lot of human rights training. But, because I remember one time, an Albanian woman, I guess she was in her 20s, who had come to my office in Dragadan, to talk about something. I got a lot of people coming there who had like questions about their Social Security in America because, their husband had gone to work in America and he had died. There was several families this happened to, and they couldn't get their Social Security checks. This was, banking was an issue, mailing the checks was an issue, and, just consular stuff. And so we ended up having to do a lot of that kind of stuff with people here in Kosovo that had nothing to do with the politics, but just trying to solve individual problems. Or, someone was in the States as working, and their kid was born, and the kid needed a new passport. But I can't get to Belgrade. I can't go to Belgrade to get it. Can you help me get a passport for my 3-year-old? Yeah, we got a lot of that kind of stuff. Well, yeah, we would do whatever we had to do to help people out. And I also had people where I remember one day this father came into the office with his 2 sons, and the 2 sons had been kind of beat up. And, I was like, okay, what do you want me to do? And he said, I just want you to see what happened on the bus today. They were riding the bus, they had these municipal buses. And, my 2 sons were riding the bus, coming back from school or going to school. And some Serb high school students, beat them up and called them shiptars and all this stuff. And I just want you to see how my kids were treated. And that was all. They just wanted to have a witness. And I had a bunch of people like that over the course of time. I remember one guy came in one time and he literally dropped his pants right in the middle of my office, and I mean all the way, and showed how he had been beaten on his buttocks and legs with truncheons, the nightsticks. And he just had these wounds all over his backside. And he said, I just want you to see this so you understand what we're going through. And we had quite a number of those kinds of cases to happen. And then I think my successors had even more of those as things started heating up. But, we would tell them, we would usually refer them to Adam Damachi's NGO. I wish I could remember the name of it. But I would say, it's important that you document this. Okay, just get it in the record. Take pictures. Give a statement. Just put it in the record that this happened. I can't go find these guys on the bus and get them arrested. I can't pay your hospital bills or, do anything like that, but at least get it documented. Mm-hmm. And, quite often they would do that. We would certainly make note of it. We had some cases where Albanian activists were arrested for no seemingly good reason. I mean, there never was a good reason back then. But I would then go to the Serbian authorities here and say, this person was arrested. I know you have him. We're going to keep asking you about this person. We need to get reports about it, or I'm going to tell the State Department in Washington that you're not doing something. And if this person dies, we're going to know about it. And their prison treatment would change. Mm-hmm. Just putting them on notice that they were being watched, would make a difference. And sometimes I couldn't do any more than that, but it would help.
There were also some political prisoners back then.
Yeah.
Did you visit them? Or?
No, I couldn't visit them because they were not my country. See, if it was an American that was in prison, then you have Vienna Convention obligations to let a consular official visit them in prison and bring them, food or comic books or, whatever they want. You do have rights to do that for your own country, but when it comes to doing it for another country, it's a different issue. But since we were the only diplomats here, their families would come and tell us things. And so their families would come and say that, so-and-so, my brother, my son, my father, my uncle, whatever, is in this prison. This is happening to him. Is there anything you can do? And then we would just go to the Serbian authorities and say, we know this person is in this prison. You're obligated under Serbian law to provide certain things, certain protections, certain human rights practices. We're following this case, and if anything bad happens to this guy, it's going in the human rights report that we do every year, and you'll be on record as having done this, and that's not going to be good for Serbia's image. And sometimes that's all you can do, but that's important that you do it. And that's why these NGOs here were so important at that time. I mean, they still are. But when it comes to situations where you have gross human rights abuses and, conflicts, ethnic conflicts, whatever, documentation is vital. And you've got to be able to show evidence at some point of what's going on. And, this is why Adam Damachi's work was so vital at that time, because, you would go to his office and, literally, this entire wall, a space that size, covered, just bookshelves, with reams and reams of testimony and data and photographs and tape recordings and everything else. And, they had this massive documentation of what was going on here.
The council?
Sorry?
The council for the...
Yeah, that's it.
Human rights.
Yeah. Yeah, I just couldn't remember the name, but getting older. But at any rate, that's why that kind of stuff was so vital. And when we would go and meet with them, they would be pulling notebooks off the wall and opening them up and showing us things where we knew it was not just a bunch of crazy Albanians talking. It was like, holy crap, look what is happening to these people. And that's once you start convincing a bunch of diplomats that this kind of thing is going on, they in turn are convincing their capitals and their foreign ministries of what's going on, and that's how policy gets changed. So the work of an NGO to meet with a lower level embassy officer and to show the evidence of what's happening and to give them ammunition that they can use in their reporting back to their capitals, that's how things change.